Hello, Americans, and people of the human species body of individual bodies. There are a whole bunch of people tied to and as a Joshua Julian who were spying on me with other people from other countries and planting evidences with people on off the state judicial branch offices, and on off the state corrections offices, and on off prisons tied to them, and their homes and their roles with crime spots and body dumping spots and names next to them. Because of their roles too at countries A through Z with torture methods, plural, that are bound by a singular breaching method that forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded other countries, as what is actually recorded, to blame other things, others, ourselves for what it caused, like slavery. You guys have others blame. You have our founders blamed for slavery and self-valued roles with readings of American history that are uses of our founders' words, leaving out what they had declassified about that, about how and why no one had free speech to a great extent, /S. And simultaneously, they had to pretend other to a great extent, /S, even though that was involved with their own torture, the torture of themselves, the torture of the ones around them, the extortion of themselves, the extortion of the ones around them, and the fact human nature slavery, therefore physical slavery of the ones around them and themselves, too, to an extent. You guys have self-valued roles, forcing, tricking, hurting, and persuading other things, others, ourselves, to be blamed for where and for how you have prevented individual bodies on a mass scale from using where and how we have black people's rights of eyes. We have all these hyper-evidential proofs. Like, for example, many Americans have said that things are unnatural. And then they hear people in the news media. So they have actors and they have real motivations for their narratives behind why they have the syntax the way they do. Subject treatments, sentence sensibilities, to use Jane Austen's phrase. But before we even get to her, and after, in other words, no one can, they have me in fake conversations with WFSB and the differences of the guilt of the people at WFSB, their sources or the intelligence next to them, or the people at and next to the crime scenes, including their roles with years apart, connected child abusers, leaders of kids. Connecticut's news locations have roles with the intelligence community, where and how they have roles of predicate acts with facts with databases since before computers. And then hyper additionally with other natures and methods of predicate acts with facts methods. Collusion /S with that original databases. Identity of relativity /relativities plural to ourselves that the breaching method is. And where and how nature has itself demonstrates this to us. Simultaneously, where and how our founders did too. But we have that replaced, even though it's declassified. James Madison's plan is what forced. Even George Washington counter-extorted. But agreeing to use James Madison's plan because it's the only plan. They had to leave slavery entrenched. They did not want slavery entrenched. They couldn't delineate about that. That was declassified too with their communications, but there's communications, racketeering worse than war crimes. I'm not a police firm, I'm not a criminal. Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with themselves at the Wethersfield police station as a kid, and fake ties to other strangers. And fake natures of ties to others as a kid and then as an adult. And to cover that up, they pretended such with the news. Increasingly, Joe DeMoro has educators and classmates. I never had classes with him. They tried to make a fake exception with a Mr. Neville with a middle school class. All three people in that middle school class recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they have roles with more than 3 houses on Church Street involved with predicate acts with them and with putting predicate acts in databases and acting tied to it. These are people on and off the corrections offices of Connecticut on and off the judicial branch offices, as the ones involved with the hotel next to Fox Connecticut News, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, and their family members and their neighbors, the neighbors of a John LeConte, I'm not a John, the neighbors of family members of a neighbor of a John LeConte are also involved with the neighbors of Dominic Lepriata, and neighbors in different natures of conjunctions to Thaddeus Grabowski, involved next to Fox Connecticut News, right before a 2006 district court part of a case with the defendant's former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, and 3 co-defendants of his and their lawyer, and play people with conjunctions to their lawyer, are also increasingly involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, and their roles with people with the buildings next to Fox Connecticut News, with foreign and domestic intelligence involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, not just spying, using fake and other people's fake information, including cases, changing the outcome of cases. And WFSB has role, and other Connecticut News and their sources have roles with the Local 230 and their family members, with more scams of money from the union, with proven federal criminals involved with pension crimes, and they were they put me in fake conversations about an LRB case, and faked and changed communications about another case. How they do that? In other words, as one of these people involved next to Fox Connecticut News is one of the people involved intercities. There's a Charlie Bose who might be tied to the Bose bird, because there are a bunch of people with the state judicial branch offices involved with the Charlie Bose, and a woman who says it's his sister at the Old Town Cafe in Old Wethersfield, and the founding locations there, and people next to it. Increasingly involved with people from my area, with interbranch multiple police departments putting fake ties to kids with foreign and domestic families at the same time. They have overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and their educators involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. And so increasingly, too, state police families, interstates, and intelligence people from a whole bunch of different countries tied to with Eric Jensen and a Mike Roberts, a Mike Pandolf. In other words, planting evidences intercities with multiple police departments and people tied to them, planting evidences in my area and all sides of my house. And they took my Facebook pages away with people who confirmed things right before that about their roles. Facebook themselves, they have roles of people all along Route 3 and conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices, has roles with names and names tied to them all along Route 3, who went out of their way to plant evidence as fake motivations, including people with interbranch, including there's a guy who gave me a traffic ticket. I was even speeding. Has something to do with their roles with the town lines at Wethersfield, at all town lines intercities. I don't know his name, but they know it on the record. He's involved with a whole bunch of men and women at New Britain Superior Court involved with sexual and medical offenders years apart. And they have the news rolls with them. At the same time, the different news locations and the intelligence next to them, the difference of themselves, the named intelligence next to them, or their sources. They have wire crime acts and methods, and then acting tied to those predicate acts. They attach me to fake conversations with themselves about the World Trade Center attack, WFSB. They're refusing to identify themselves legitimately, too, because how they're using and have used time, criminally foreign influence, right through administrations, too. They put fake transcripts. They put fake conversations with little kids, with doctors, fake ties to doctors that weren't at all. Then they make fake exceptions, not even conversations. People, in other words, change and fake what's actually recorded. A whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital have a Smith family and have a Cololo family involved with Wethersfield police and retired police chiefs, with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, with doctors and their family members, and the family members of various courts, judges, and prosecutors at the same time with their patients, and people from campuses and run into their to be patients, to be all sides of issues, and put and say things and pretend just fake when there's no response to it. Just put fake responses. Increasingly, the families also that work with phones, where they have treatments of domestics, like for example on a mass scale, like where there are apartment buildings where people are forced to ignore things in the speech that are dishonest, or pretending to be honest too simultaneously of others. For example, on a mass scale, that was exploited because they recorded the breaching method shows them they have to hide what there's actually means to discern. They are being and haven't been used remotely, collusion with all natures of crime scenes, including names next to them. The difference of that exploited. It's manifest that way because they are being and haven't been used remotely syntactically as criminally foreign influence tactical delusions raw, subject treatments, and sequence values. At the same time, names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the names of the courts, and the names of the different positions with the courts. Those differences are used remotely, collusion /S. Also, what is on off the corrections offices of Connecticut and on off the state judicial branch offices. Names increasingly tied to child abusers, leaders of kids, and untimely deaths that were years apart, and body dumping spots that were brought up again. And, they're brought up at the same time. This is also recorded through Facebook. That's why Facebook has their own roles personally with predicate acts, criminally foreign influence, and methods of them, and distinctly from the FBI directors, plural. A former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, is increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and putting fake things in databases with Wethersfield police, with many nations, and with Hartford police forms families through time, including retired Wethersfield police chiefs with the same house /S personally and professionally involved with them and with their confessions, but they're also switching and forging names. So these are torture, extortion, slavery methods still. Back to nature slavery, therefore physically. These are people involved with each names next to each of the campuses I went to, even ones they didn't go to. In other words, they're making connections between kids, acting tied to the people putting predicate acts with databases. Many people tied to Wethersfield mayors and mayors from Connecticut put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. Also, other natures of politicians and their family members. Just for a method, too. Certain type of victim /hyper victim doesn't even realize, but would have. And we would prevent that if we had education proper. There are tactically delusions wrought, too. There are some Jew syntax of people named Riley, further involved with the Board of Education, and with a Michael Emmett, also with some FBI and state police, and sexual and medical offenders of kids, further involved with some digital crimes of Wethersfield police, and mail crimes, attaching kids to fake conversations with Wethersfield police. Mendez police also did this too with them. Put me in a fake conversation with the older Mendez brother. I never had a word of conversation with him in my life. They're increasingly involved with people named DeMoro, Colol, and Scalora. Also with World Trade Center predicate acts with WFSB, with the intelligence next to them. A police chief, Centron, and 1 year ago from Wethersfield, and their intimate ties are also involved with the Mazzucato Bakery and a modern pastry, with a Maiano family, with sequence chefs putting fake things in databases and acting tied to it roles. In other words, and making confessions too, roles, and roles with Elm Street and Rocky Hill through time. Since I was a kid with my neighbors, I didn't even know them. I had to know his name was repeated to me. There are proofs that he knows the Joshua Julian too. A Joshua Julian is one of the ones involved. And people tied to teachers at the campuses intercities that mess with their sense and sensibilities. Well, they'll jump into subjects where they want to hide things and make things up and value roles without just repeating fake things dishonestly. But they'll jump into subjects anyway. So good people are stay evil. So in other words, that's why we need to get. That's why these are people with the Interbrand. A bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court have roles of predicate acts with the kids at Rocky Hill campuses, at Wethersfield campuses, as ones next to the campuses too, in Hartford and Wethersfield. Involved too, increasingly, Whiting Forensics has roles with state police, families, interstates, with the same house/S. Involve all kinds of sexual and medical offenders of kids, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, names at next to body dumping spots, all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders instances, and with they're putting in their kids in with their fake motivations, and they're repeating what other people told them. Well, that's what the police forms and the security with the campuses, and the family members of the security with the campuses. They also have roles with this at the shopping centers through time. All kinds of corruption with people that of titles that say, "Well, I'm not a doctor." They're involved with criminally foreign influence. We could demonstrate that they shouldn't be speaking about things, principles, if they can't think. In other words, they're putting fake things in the databases and refusing to identify themselves. Hartford Hospital increasingly has a whole bunch of people tied to a Leahy family, men and women in that family involved with male and female judges and prosecutors and people with the courts involved with sexual medical offenders, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, not legitimately. Their roles with all sides of the campuses with investigators use remotely criminally foreign influence that needs to hide that. Their roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases and the courts putting the same sequence shifts at the same time, and with the news, identity theft, fraud, slanders. These are predicate acts with facts methods and people and styles that have teachers that taught them about to use words like crimes, leaving out their roles of predicate acts with facts methods. The FBI has roles with names on the sides of the parks, also involve putting predicate acts with facts in databases, and with sexual circles. And then where they have collusions with that, then they confess that and demonstrate that. Then they're sitting there and they take a picture of you and you don't even know them, make it look like they know you. They try to make fake examples. The people as their roles, with the people with the name Kerr and Perone, with the spots too, with the ones with the name Bose, and next to Fox Connecticut News, with that hotel there with Thaddeus Grabowski and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and their co-defendants, and the neighbors of their co-defendants, which are also ones with a whole bunch of prosecutors and judges personally and professionally with the same house/S near me, involved with the police confessions over the phone. And they don't give the whole name because they're lying. They already recorded themselves lying about what people brought those names. Bob Chase brought up the name Phil Cololo. Wethersfield Police brought up the name Cololo, involved with them switching names. The Wethersfield Police over the phone. They had fake conversations with me at the police station when I was a kid. Now I was an adult, so I'm not going to go there. We're going to speak here now. Same thing with the FBI has wire crime acts and methods and digital crimes with the Wethersfield Police. Worse than criminal incompetence through administrations. They're investigating things, just looking in databases at transcripts, they're fake. And their own people have roles with that, like former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved also with people with the name Mueller and James Comey. They're also recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming, involved with the multiple police departments, involved with the Cololo and O'Brien, and people tied to them involved too. And they're and conjunctions to their houses, where their houses are involved with wire crime acts and methods with the police, faking and changing digital evidences, faking and changing police phones. These are families that work for the telephone companies and have roles with subject treatments and why how things unfold the way they do. Like regarding Chris Walters, increasingly recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. I only know him seeking me out to make confirmations and demonstrations about his roles with the people recorded, increasingly involved with child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart. And he's one of the ones from private schools that were influenced the roles with the judges and prosecutors involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, years apart, and then time use of that. These are not legitimate roles with the intelligence community. These aren't legitimate roles with their descriptions. Their roles with fire departments too. Their roles of they're leaving transcripts fake of their roles with instances. They are fishing for means to cover up. In other words, these are intercities tied too, next to the campuses, including fire and medical. In other words, there are generals with worse than criminal incompetence too, with the World Trade Center attack and the WFSB. Fake conversations with me about that. For your God, please fix the news. Excuse me.